Hey, it's Pastor Quincy from Cuyahoga Falls Church of the Nazarene here to talk to you about episode 5 of season 5 of The Chosen. This is a video study guide for The Chosen series, free TV series about the life of Jesus, right now available on Amazon Prime, but in September available for free on the Chosen app. Each episode begins with a scene of Jesus and his disciples at the Last Supper, at their Passover meal before Jesus' crucifixion. And here we see Jesus really struggling. The Chosen is not afraid to show you that Jesus is a human being. He struggles with his emotions, with the physical effects of his emotions, just like any human being does. I have to make a note here. You know that I offer fair criticism of the show when I can. I do not like the recast of Philip. This actor is not good. The way he delivers his line here is so wooden. But it's the strength of the other actors that carries him through, and I'm sure he's a wonderful person, but oh man, when he talks, it doesn't work for me, but maybe for other people it works. We see here the disciples trying to figure out who is going to betray Jesus. Judas suggests, well, maybe it could be Thomas. Obviously, we don't have anything that indicates that in Scripture, but I do think that the writers of the show are doing a good job filling in some blanks. Why didn't the disciples understand that it was Judas? I think there was probably at least one other disciple that people's suspicions were centered around, whether it was Matthew or Simon the Zealot or someone like Thomas. Whoever it was, they had thoughts that it might be somebody else. Even Thomas doubts himself. Is my anger the betrayal? He asks Jesus. And Jesus says, you have been faithful in spite of your anger, which I think should mean something to those of us who have been angry at God and yet faithful in prayer and faithful to follow Jesus. Jesus sees that, he accepts that, he deals with us in the middle of our anger. Here we see Jesus saying, I am among you as one who serves, as he quotes from Luke chapter 22, verses 24 through 27. He also goes on from there in Luke chapter 22, verses 28 through 30, saying that the disciples have stood by him in all their trials, and so he is going to give them a place in his kingdom. They go through the Passover meal, 10 drops of wine, 1 drop for each plague. We again hear them begin the Deanu, which is the it would have been enough portion of remembering what God did to bring his people out of Egypt. And then we go to a scene with Barnaby. Again, don't know if Barnaby turns out to be Barnabas, son of encouragement. He seems like a very encouraging person. And the tax collectors and the prostitutes are coming into the kingdom before the Pharisees. They're entering before the Pharisees, as it says in Matthew 21, verse 31. And Barnaby tells the Pharisees off. He says, my leg is more than fine because of you know who. It's Jesus who has done this in my life. We see here Caiaphas' brother-in-law, the son of Annas. Ananias wants to take Caiaphas' place, and he describes that Caiaphas doesn't understand the political dealings. He doesn't understand how the people have been hurt by past messiahs, and he needs to capitalize on that. He needs to remind the people of the good situation they have with Rome, but also the reality of the taxes that Rome places on them. They don't want things to get worse. And then we see Ananias, Caiaphas, and these various people moving in the background meet together. There's this uneasy tension his families tend to have. We see Caiaphas quote from Proverbs 11:14, an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Now, they already have the approval to arrest Jesus. Caiaphas says, we're going to get this problem solved. Nobody has to worry. Jesus, meanwhile, has left Jerusalem to head to Bethany to spend a special Passover with his women disciples. We see the story of his curse of the fig tree, which you can find in all the Gospels, not in John, but in the Synoptic Gospels. In Matthew 21, 18 through 22 seems to be the main passage that they're looking at here. But there is a reference to John and Jesus talking about tearing down what doesn't bear fruit. John 15, 1 through 7 describes Jesus as the Father as the gardener and Jesus removing branches that don't bear fruit. Jesus goes into verses from Matthew 24, verse 32, saying, summer is near, pay attention, you know what's happening here. From Matthew 24, verses 9 through 14, you will be hated by all people because of me. And then he gives his disciples the exact day that he'll be crucified, as you find in Matthew chapter 26, verse 2. And we ask the question, why don't the disciples get it? And the show does a good job of diving into that a little bit later on to ask the question. Jesus specifically tells his disciples what's going to happen. Why don't they understand what he's saying? We go to a scene with Pilate's wife, Claudia. Pilate is confronting her. She's telling what's happening in her dream. There's a garden, there's olives, there's a lion, there's a curtain, there's horses. A lot of this references things we know about the crucifixion, about the life of Jesus. And she wants to leave but decides she can't leave because who knows what Pilate might do to Jesus. We know that she has a dream that she sends to Pilate to warn him not to have anything to do with Jesus, and we're being set up for that. Atticus shows up, the Secret Service officer from Rome, gets physical with Pilate, tells him he needs to be ready to take the reins, ready to deal with the Jesus situation. Finally, we have this very chilling scene from Caiaphas before the Sanhedrin as they argue about Jesus, where Caiaphas says the only answer is prayer. And wow, what a prayer he prays. He focuses in on Psalm 78, verses 8 through 10. He focuses in a little bit, I think, on Isaiah 14, verse 14, where he's accusing Jesus of setting himself higher than God, as Isaiah does a Lucifer character. And in Psalm 102:13, we hear the echoes of that in Caiaphas' prayer, praying that God would show mercy to Zion and mercy to his people. This is a very chilling prayer because I think it's a prayer we can all imagine us as a righteous people praying. Remove the evildoer, remove the threat to our safety and security. But in this case, the safety and security is the real Messiah who's come to bring them peace. But Caiaphas cannot recognize that. He cannot get out of his own head. And how many times do we see our political persuasion, our favorite politician, our way of doing things as the most important thing that should be protected at all costs, and we miss the call of the gospel in our lives to bend our lives in obedience to be instruments of peace and love in the communities around us? We're meant to think about that as we hear Caiaphas's very chilling prayer in this scene. And Shmuel is disturbed. Shmuel is disturbed by this reality that now Jesus is going to receive the full brunt of all the political power and the religious authority of Caiaphas as they try to kill him. The disciples come back to the house. They're traumatized as they try to figure out what Jesus means when he says he's going to die. Is he being metaphysical? Is he being metaphorical? What is going on here? We don't understand. We just wanted to see how we would react. Maybe it's some kind of test that they're meant to pass. And Thomas bravely puts out, if Jesus means what he said, then that means we've all been deceived. Peter says, hey, he speaks in parables. But Judas picks right up on Thomas says, if he's crucified, we have our answer. We can keep going on looking for a real Messiah. But in the event that he evades death and strikes down his enemies, then he'll usher in the Messianic age. We can trust him in this, Judas argues, because either he's not who he says he is, or he proves himself to be the Messiah. We see Judas's motivations all out in the open for everyone. Now, I think he has some other selfish motivation going on, but at his heart, Judas in this series, and I think probably in real life, wants Jesus to prove that he's the Messiah. He's not willing to accept this Messiah who dies on behalf of the world and just shows love to his enemies. But surely Jesus will show himself to be a different kind of Messiah when he is threatened with death. That's what Judas thinks, but obviously he misses the redemptive plan of God being revealed in Jesus. After this tense scene, Simon the Zealot leaves the house and stumbles over a rock. Wonder if we're meant to think of Isaiah 8:14 that says that the one God has sent becomes a rock over which people stumble. Jesus' message here about the dying crucified Messiah is what Paul describes as a rock that makes people stumble, as the thing that people don't understand about Christianity, and we see that beginning to happen here. Simon sees that Atticus is going after Cophny and company and trying to confront them and get them to be instruments in his plan to stop Jesus. So we see him follow along and become aware of that. And then Malchus meets Shmuel as he comes to tell Caiaphas that they have an asset who should help them, be able to help them lead to Jesus. And that's where this episode heads to. So from this point, we see Judas brought before Caiaphas, and we see Mary Magdalene, who is searching in the city of Jerusalem for some help, for someone, probably Yusuf, who can help stop what's going to happen to Jesus. And she's kidnapped and brought before Nicodemus. The big reveal at this end of this episode is that Nicodemus has returned. Very glad to see this actor found some time for the show in his busy schedule. Have missed him since he was gone, but it actually worked out very nicely for Nicodemus to return to the show at this point in the process. And it was exciting to see Mary Magdalene and him brought together. Looking forward to see how the show addresses their connection from this point.